Today, we're going to teach you how to find a leak in your pond. So we get a lot of phone calls about ponds that are leaking, and we're working with people all across the nation how to troubleshoot, how to find a particular leak. So we do this quite a bit, and if you're not sure whether you have a leak or not, I want you to check out one of the other Ask the Pond Digger shows. Here's a link right here I'll give you. Go check that out. It's another show that we did. But this is, you know you have a leak, and we want to get to the bottom of it. So we're going to start off like this. The first and foremost is we turn off the automatic fill valve to the pond if you have something like that. We want to turn off all the pumps that are running circulation, air pumps and water pumps. If possible, we want to shut all that down. So if you have a fish population, it's important that you're going to do this in the evening. It's always tough to try and tackle this in the mid-summer. So if it's summertime, we might take a couple of precautions. But let's say it's not too hot out, it's spring or it's winter, it's fall, and the temperature's okay. We're going to shut everything off, and we want to do it in the evening time. So we're going to start, usually the wind dies down for us in the evening, it's nice and calm, and so we're not going to have any evaporation due to wind and so forth. So this is going to happen in the evening time. If it is warm outside, the temperatures are going to be cooler, so it's not going to be as stressful on your fish. I'm going to be careful about this because if you have a lot of aquatic plants use oxygen at night, and that could be dangerous for your fish as well. So definitely consult with a professional about if you have a big fish load. You're probably going to have to at least inject some air into the pond in the evening. So with that being said, your fish are safe. We're tackling this in the evening time. We want to run a 12-hour cycle. So we're going to start at 8 p.m. and 8 in the morning. We're going to find out if the pond has dropped anything. The first thing we want to do is we want to isolate whether the pond is leaking, or the plumbing is leaking, or maybe you have a stream. We want to determine where the stream's leaking. So there's kind of three different segments. Now most of the ponds that we're installing are liner ponds. Most of the DIY people we're helping are liner ponds. So that's what this is going to be focused on, a rubber liner style pond. Whether you have rocks and gravel or a dedicated koi pond with just liner, that's what we're going to be focused on. So what we want to do is we want to isolate the pond, the plumbing, and the waterfall and stream. Those three different things. So everything's shut off. We're working on the pond right now. If in fact your pond holds water overnight, it goes that 12 hours and it maybe dropped a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch, you would say the pond is pretty stable. So now it's going to be in the plumbing or it's going to be in the waterfall stream. And a lot of times you can inspect the pond visually, and you can go around and inspect faceplate seals on skimmers, faceplate seals on waterfall filters. You can walk around the edge of the pond and look for low edges, because typically that's where it's going to be. If your pond's been running smooth for years and now it's leaking, it's most likely something in the hardware on a faceplate, or maybe a low edge in the stream. Maybe it just rained really hard. Maybe an animal knocked an edge down. So let's move back to the pond is holding. If you have a check valve in your system, your waterfall filter should be holding water. You see what I'm saying? So that's what the responsibility of the check valve is. You shut the pump off, the check valve holds all the water in the plumbing, holds the water in the waterfall filter. So if you lose water in the waterfall filter, then that means we could have a breach inside of our plumbing somewhere. So if the waterfall filter should lose water, the first thing I typically do is I put a brand new check valve in the system to make sure that we didn't have a faulty check valve, because check valves can lose a little bit of water and they can start to fail over time as well. So let's say we put the check valve in and now our plumbing is intact and we're keeping water inside the waterfall. Now we're just doing we're eliminating things. The pond's been eliminated. Now the plumbing has been eliminated. Now we focus on the waterfall and stream. We know the leak could be in there. You see what I'm saying? And usually it's a low edge. Maybe a lot of times aquatic plants grow really heavily in the streams, and they back the water up like a dam, and we lose just a little bit of water out the side of the stream or the back of the waterfall. So that's a very typical process right there. If you've built your pond in the last 20 years, and you have a skimmer on there. Some of the skimmers that we were using, 15, 20 years ago, they had hardware that would corrode after a certain amount of time, usually 7 to 10 years. So usually I'll ask how old is the pond. If it's 7 to 10 years old, I will look into the faceplate of that skimmer and see if the hardware's been corroded, because we can jump to things right away if that hardware's corroded and the water level drops in the pond at that skimmer hole in the opening of the skimmer, then we know there could be a breach inside the skimmer. So that's a spot that I look quite a bit. And also inside the waterfall filter, the screws and hardware around that can be corroded as well, and then we can have leaks from there. But let's say the water level drops and your skimmer hardware looks good, okay? So I don't always just tear the skimmer apart. Let's say the water stops in the middle of the skimmer, and you might think, hey, it must be the skimmer. But you don't always take that skimmer apart right away. We take each step. We check the hardware of the skimmer. If it doesn't look questionable or barely questionable, I won't jump to conclusions and just replace the skimmer faceplate. If you're in a hurry, you can do that, but a lot of times we want to inspect the perimeter of the pond. Now, the bigger the pond is, the longer it's going to take you to do, but let's say you have 11 by 16 pond, and that's a pretty common size pond. So we just have the perimeter of the pond to inspect. And so if it's a rock pond with rock and gravel in there, we want to move the stonework right where the water level is at in the pond, and that's where you're going to find a hole if there's a breach in the liner. We just pick up the rocks and start moving them down the line all the way around the edge of the pond, and we can find it. I'll tell you, one of the most frustrating leaks that I ever experienced was in a pond, and it was a brand new install, and it was probably maybe the third or fourth pond I had ever really done professionally, and the water level dropped down right to the bottom of the skimmer. So I just knew it was the skimmer. I must have done it wrong. I've only done a few of them. So I took the skimmer apart and I put it back together, sealed it all up. It was beautiful. I filled up the pond, high-fived the team and everybody, hugged the homeowner. We got it solved. Everything's cool. And the homeowner calls me and says the pond's still leaking. So I went back to the pond, and I knew it was the pond because I did the process I just told you. I shut everything off, the autofill, the pumps, the plumbing. The waterfall still kept its water in it, so I knew the check valve and the plumbing was all good to go, but the pond lost water. So literally I started peeling off the rock. It dropped about 8 inches. So I started peeling the rock around the edges of the pond, and I couldn't find any breaches in the liner. And it lost water very quickly. So, it lost 8 inches, overnight pretty much. So that's a lot of water loss. So I knew it had to be a pretty good size hole. So I peeled all the stuff around the whole entire pond, and everything was fine, and now we're into the waterfall. And so I had to start to peel the waterfall apart. So we start peeling apart the waterfall rocks, and what happened was there was the pond liner went up, and the streamliner came down, and there was a fold in the liner when we were doing the curves, and the fold had fell down 8 inches. And it was funny because I peeled the rock apart, and I found the fold, and I'm telling you, the water was like right at the bottom of the fold. Right where the fold was, the water came right to it, like perfect, like microscopic pinpoint. That's where you got to go. And that's what you're going to find when you do when you find this leak. Now, that was a new installation, but my experience tells you that we tested the water just like anything, and I jumped to conclusions on the skimmer. If I would have just tested it and moved some rocks around, then I would have known that it was probably in that fold. So, but the process is all the same. Manage the fish health first, the fish life support first, and then go through the processes of elimination to help find the leak. And then if you have a breach in your plastic of the rubber liner, it's very easy to seal. It's very easy to patch, just like doing a patch on a rubber tire, and then you can fill the whole thing back up. So that's pretty much the process of how we go. And low edges can be found in streams. A lot of times if you finish the pond, I know this is a big, heavy topic, and there's a lot of different ways to go, so I want to make sure you have it all. If it's just in the stream, most of the time, if the pond has been going for a long time, you're going to find it's due to the plants. I would thin the plants out really well. A lot of times when I thin the plants out in the stream, I see the water level drop almost a ½ inch in the stream. You can see the water lines in the creek or the stream. As the plants start to grow and they dam it up a little bit, the water increases a little bit, and you'll even see a little algae line on the rocks in the stream in the waterfall. and they grow a little bit more. The water rises in the creek. You'll see the algae lines start to stay in there. And as soon as you thin that plant life out and open those spillways up and let that water rush down through there, you'll see that algae line. You'll see the water drop sometimes, like I said, a half an inch. And then if you let it get too much, then it just starts pushing water out the sides. And it's not always easy to hide if you have a really heavily planted landscape around the waterfall and stream. Sometimes it's really hard to see where that water is just pouring out the sides like that. So I think we covered it pretty well. I know you're probably gonna have some questions. If you're experiencing a leak, please put your comments down in there, and I can help you guide you through it. Maybe I didn't cover everything specifically in here that are gonna pertain to your pond, but go ahead and add your questions to there, and I can help you go through that. And that's gonna bring us to the question of the day. I wanna know if there's one thing you could change about your pond, what would it be? I think that's one of the things that helps me grow and get better and better year after year, is because when I finish building a pond, I usually step back and reflect on it and ask myself, if there's one thing I could change about it, what would it be? Would it be filtration? Would it be depth? Would it be shape, composition? Give it to me, give it real specific, put it right here in the comments below. It's gonna be good to get inside your mind and know what you wanna change about your pond. And until next time, I'm Eric Triplett, the Pond Digger. Thanks for watching.